a good place to start is with some of the things that were described by girlfriend Zofie Bowman. Now, just as a context, Zofie Bowman and Aiden Fucci had been dating since January or February of 2021, so multiple months, spent a lot of time together. Ms. Bowman described that she and Mr. Fucci and some other peers, they were kind of into what she described as gore, what she described as horror, H-O-R-R-O-R. So they like to watch horror movies. They like to watch gory horror movies. So she commented about that. She also characterized that they all had what she described as dark humor. Okay, so that was part of the context where she disclosed some of this information. She said that she and Mr. Fucci talked a lot about things they saw on these horror shows and gory movies, that a lot of times they would discuss death and killing in the context of these types of movies, okay? But she went beyond that a bit, and she also described that her words were that Mr. Fucci talked about death and killing a lot, okay? Now, he talked about death and killing a lot. She gave a couple of examples when Mr. Fucci got really mad at her because she sent a picture of her in a photo with another guy that happened to be her sister's boyfriend or friend that was a boy. And she said that Mr. Fucci got extremely upset about this, and his reaction was to say he was going to kill that boy. She also gave an example of Zofie Bowman asking Mr. Fucci, would you like to hang out with me and a couple of my guy friends? And she said that Mr. Fucci's response to that was to talk about how he was going to kill those two guy friends. So this is important because there was a lot of this killing and death talk from Mr. Fucci that's unusual. And it was occurring outside of just the context of talking about gory movies, right? Sometimes that was the context. Other times it wasn't. Mm-hmm. Like the example of him saying he was going to kill these boys that she was around. In that same theme, she talked about, her words were that Mr. Fucci talked about wanting to kill her, and that he would sometimes do things to her like take his knife out and pretend to stab her, or walk up behind her and pretend to slit her throat. Now, she indicated she wasn't scared of this. She wasn't scared of Mr. Fucci because she trusted him with regard to those specific acts. But it was interesting that he would make the comment that he wanted to kill his girlfriend, Zofie Bowman. She took it as kind of a joke and is not serious. She also made a similar comment that I thought was significant, that Zofie Bowman said, that's basically why Mr. Fucci no longer stayed at my house, because he talked about how easy it would be to kill me when I slept. So you see, this is going beyond just kind of this talk about gory movies. It's, I'm not sleeping at your house because you would be really easy to kill while you're sleeping. A really, really peculiar, unusual, rare kind of comment repeatedly made to one of Mr. Fucci's closest friends. Now, it even goes beyond this, okay? So this is the thing that is, I think, most relevant, although the things I was talking about are relevant to this particular case, but the most relevant verbalizations by Mr. Fucci in the Tristan Bailey murder was Zofie Bowman recalled Aiden Fucci telling her that basically asking, what would you do if I really killed somebody? And then following that up with, expect me to kill somebody within this month. So Zofie Bowman was asked if she could pin the date down. She couldn't exactly pin it down, but she said she believed that remark was made by Mr. Fucci in the month of May of 2021, the same month where the murder occurred. Okay, and when talking about how he would kill, so really it's extensive. It's not just a remark here and there. It seemed to be a real fascination of his. When he talked about killing somebody, he even told Zofie Bowman how he would do it. And what he told her was, I would walk around at night and I would find somebody else walking at night. I would drag them in the woods and I would stab them, and then I would pretend like I didn't do it so that I could keep killing people. Now, kind of, again, in a vacuum, that's a weird statement. That's a weird remark. But this isn't in a vacuum. When we examine that statement occurring close to when Tristan Bailey was murdered and how similar, how remarkably similar it is, it speaks to me. It speaks to emotional health, first off. It's unusual. I can't stress that enough, how unusual it is for a peer to be talking about this kind of thing so frequently in such detail with such gore. It's pretty bizarre, and to actually carry it out, because that's the other thing. We compare Mr. Fucci to his population, other juveniles. Juveniles sometimes make violent remarks. Juveniles sometimes talk about violent fantasies. It isn't something that usually kind of predominates what they verbalize, or is a fascination like it seemed to be with Mr. Fucci. But to get as specific as Mr. Fucci got in terms of talking with Zofie Bowman about the things he was thinking, I think it really suggests to me that he's giving a glimpse of what he's thinking about, what he's fantasizing about. She even said that she believed he was just talking about a fantasy. But even so, fantasy is rehearsal. Often it's a rehearsal of what we want to do or what we're interested in. So there seemed to be a lot of that going on with Mr. Fucci preceding the murder of Tristan Bailey. And it's different because he actually carried it out. Okay, he carried out that fantasy. He just didn't verbalize it. He verbalized what he'd like to do and that he would do it soon, and he actually did it, which suggests some rehearsing of that very kind of instance with Tristan Bailey.
Is that sort of verbalization and all the different pieces of evidence that you have that point to that thought process, is that even unusual amongst juveniles that commit violent acts?
It is. It's very unusual. And again, it's not that uncommon for juveniles to talk about something violent occasionally or get in a fight occasionally, but to talk about death and dying in almost a preoccupied way, it's extremely, extremely unusual. And that violent, not punching somebody in the face, stabbing somebody. He also made the comments to his best friend, Trey Absher, that I'll talk about next in that same vein.
And before we move on to Trey, when you were originally talking about how some of the context of these comments were in sort of a shared interest of watching horror movies with Zofie, his girlfriend, did she explain, though, a difference between what she was interested in and what Mr. Fucci was interested in that respect?
Yes, thank you for reminding me of that. Yeah, so that was an interesting thing, too. So Zofie Bowman made it clear I like gore and horror, but it was fictional. It wasn't real. It was a movie. It was pretend, right? But she said that she commented about Mr. Fucci actually pulling up videos off the internet that were real life gore videos. So they're out there. So real life gore videos of, she said, somebody getting his head chopped off or somebody getting shot. And that was a distinction she made. She said, yeah, I like gore, but it's fictional and fake. Whereas he seemed to look for the real life, not TV stuff, and he enjoyed looking at that.
Sophie had also witnessed Mr. Fucci, outside of herself, commit a violent act or be in a fight, I believe, as well, close in time.
She talked about seeing him violent when he beat up another kid at a food truck one Friday night. Basically, stole his vape pen. Mr. Fucci stole the kid's vape pen, and the child wanted it back, and Mr. Fucci beat up the child.
And when he described the type of people he wanted to kill, do you recall what Sophie indicated the type of people, whether they were people he liked or didn't like?
Well, he said he wanted to kill people he liked, and she specifically referenced in that case that he kind of pulled that from a horror movie. He related to that line in the horror movie of killing somebody you liked. She also indicated that he typically talked about killing other guys, less so about girls, more about guys.
Okay. And then what information, if any, did his closest best friend, Trey Absher, have, consistent or inconsistent with Sophie?
I mean, it's more of the same thing. So I think one of the differences in Trey Absher in terms of what Mr. Fucci verbalized to him is the statement, it would be satisfying to slit somebody's throat, and the statement, it would be satisfying to watch the blood drain out. Now, really unusual, again, unusual for anybody to make those remarks as that satisfying, right? What was interesting is Trey Absher had a response that I thought represented what is within the realm of normal, a normal response to these remarks by Mr. Fucci. So I think it would be satisfying to slit somebody's throat. I think it would be satisfying to watch the blood drain out. Trey Absher's remark was it was weird and not normal. And he even said that I can't imagine stabbing somebody like that, especially repeatedly. Okay, so it's interesting to think about. That's a normal response. Most of us can't imagine doing this harm to another person, especially in such violent and close-up way. And that was Trey's experience of those remarks, but Mr. Fucci didn't seem to have any compunction to making those remarks and understand, the effect it had on even his friend.
Dr. Pritchard, kind of moving into the information you gathered about Mr. Fucci's general background, his family, home, and community, what of significance did you note was present and not present about Mr. Fucci's background that ultimately adds to some of the opinions you give in this case?
Right, so this was a little bit of a mixed bag too, depending on who you asked. So I'll go with Zoffie Bowman and Trey Absher first, peers. So Zoffie Bowman in particular talked about Mr. Fucci telling her that things were really difficult at home, that he did not feel very loved or appreciated by his parents. He felt like he was the least important and least liked out of all the family. Zofie Bowman also said that Mr. Fucci described that his biological father, Jason Fucci, was sometimes physically abusive. She chronicled 4 specific incidents where Mr. Fucci told her that Dad choked him one time, slapped him one time, and punched him 2 times. So 4 separate incidents of what she described as Mr. Fucci saying Jason Fucci was physically abusive towards him. She also described that Mother was not a very good mother figure